Hey there, everyone. My name is Hannah Beebe. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am the Research and Instruction Librarian here at VCSU. Basically, my job is to make your lives as students easier. Today, I'm going to talk to you about sources and APA formatting. This PowerPoint presentation is available in the Psych 250 research guide below this video, so don't worry too much about needing to write anything down. I have also done my best to ensure that the captions on this video are accurate. If there is an accessibility need that you have that I have overlooked, please don't hesitate to let me know. My contact information is available through the library website and is linked at the end of the PowerPoint. So a quick overview of what I'm going over today. We'll talk about what peer-reviewed articles are and how to find them. I'll introduce you to a way of evaluating sources by looking at a broader context. Then we'll cover how to format a paper and cite sources in APA style, and how to adapt APA for presentations. We talk a lot about using peer-reviewed articles in academic writing, but what does that really mean, and why does it matter? Hopefully I can shed some light on these questions in this section. What is a peer-reviewed article anyway? Peer-reviewed articles are scholarly articles that have been read and approved by other experts in the field that the article is about. These articles are published in academic journals a vast majority of the time. It's important to know that not every piece of writing published in an academic journal is actually peer-reviewed. Usually, editorials, news pieces, and media reviews are not peer-reviewed regardless of their published location. Also worth noting is that newspapers and magazines are not academic journals, even if the magazine is published by a professional organization, and most are not peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed articles are usually longer than 2 pages and should include a bibliography, references, or works cited section. There are a few good reasons to use peer-reviewed sources in your academic writing. First, peer-reviewed sources tend to be higher quality because they have been read and edited by several people. Reviewers look at everything from spelling and grammar to the accuracy and validity of research methods used in the study. While it's possible for there to be errors in peer-reviewed sources, there's a much lower chance of error than a source that does not go through the same rigors. The second reason for using peer-reviewed sources is to give your work more credibility. When you write a research paper or any paper about a subject you're studying, you need to back up your arguments with facts. Using strong, peer-reviewed sources will help your paper go from an opinion piece to an academic work. Finally, and most practically, you should use peer-reviewed sources because they're required for a lot of the assignments you do as a college student. Professors want you to use academic research for your work, and doing so is a good way to meet their expectations. Finding peer-reviewed sources through the library is pretty straightforward. The advanced search functions, both in the library catalog and in the databases you can access through the library, have options to filter search results by peer-reviewed journals only. The library's advanced search function can be accessed by opening the library's homepage and clicking the advanced search link below the main search bar. To access specific databases, you can use our A to Z database list or go to a research help guide like the Psych 250 guide. Both resources are located under Research and Assignments on the library homepage. You'll see that at the top of the library page, there's 3 tabs, and Research and Assignments is one of those. We have a Databases and Searching Tips help guide with detailed instructions on using these resources, which I've linked on this slide. You can also contact me, and I'll happily show you the ropes. Now that we've covered how to find sources, I want to spend just a minute talking about how to evaluate resources using what is called the CCOW or CCAL method. So what is CCAL? CCAL is an acronym that Anthony Tardif, a librarian at Gonzaga University, put together to help students and other researchers evaluate resources. The reason I like this method so much is because it's an easy way to remember that information does not exist in a vacuum. In other words, CCAL encourages us to look at our sources critically using external information. I have a link here in the slides to his very helpful research guide if you want to dig deeper than what we cover in this video. Let's talk about what CCAL actually stands for. The first C is for credentials. Credentials are the reasons why the author is a qualified, trustworthy expert in the topic being discussed. The second C is for claims. Claims are the ideas and conclusions in a source and the accuracy and relevance of those ideas. The O is for objectives. The objectives of a source are the goals of the source and the context that the source exists in. The W stands for worldview. Worldview is like bias, but with less of the negative connotation. Worldview asks how the author looks at the world, as well as how you as a researcher look at the world. A good way to apply CCAL when choosing research articles is to ask questions. The questions I've listed here are just a starting point. The more questions you can ask, the better. Some examples for each of these topics. For credentials, you might ask, who is the author? What is their background? Are they an expert in the subject I'm researching? For claims, you might ask, are the claims accurate? Does the author cite other sources? How long ago were these claims made? Are the claims actually relevant to what I'm trying to learn for my research? For objectives, you might ask, why was the source written? What is the context? Was it published in an academic journal? Who's the expected audience for the article? And for worldview, you might ask questions like, what perspective is the creator coming from? What is your personal perspective on the topic? Are you more or less likely to accept the information from this source based on whether you agree or disagree with it? Those sorts of things. How are y'all hanging in there? The great thing about this instruction being in a video format means that if you need to, you can totally pause me for a minute. I won't be offended. This is the halfway point of the slides, but the second half of the presentation is just a little bit more content heavy because we're going to switch gears and talk about APA formatting and citations. What is APA style? What we call APA style is a very specific way of formatting a paper and creating source citations. APA stands for the American Psychological Association, so you can imagine why you might be using it for a psych class. You will often see APA 7 or APA 6, especially if you're looking at citation generators. The number, that 6 or that 7, refers to the edition of the APA style manual that is being used. The newest edition is APA 7, and so all of your citations should use those APA 7 guidelines. The basic format expectations for APA papers are pretty similar to the default in a word processor like Microsoft Word. Papers should be double-spaced with 1-inch margins. There's not one required font. Instead, the APA requires a legible, accessible font. Some examples of this are 11-point Arial, 11-point Calibri, or 12-point Times New Roman, that classic. Papers should include a title page, a references page, and page numbers in the header that start on that title page. Quotes and other people's ideas should be cited using parenthetical in-text citations, which we'll cover in a bit. Let's talk about what an APA title page should look like. A title page for a student paper in APA format must include the following information: the paper's title, the author's name, that's you, the department and university the paper is written for, the course section number and name, the professor's name, and the due date of the assignment. This information should all be double-spaced and centered on the first page of your document. The title should be 3 to 4 lines below the top of the page and have all of the important words capitalized. Words like and, or, of, things like that do not get capitalized. Each piece of information goes on a new line of your page, but you should leave an extra blank space between the title and the author. Authors' names and the professors' names should be written first name, middle initial, last name. Of course, it's pretty difficult to visualize all of this information just by me saying it at you, so let's go ahead and look at an example. Here we have an example of a title page set up as if I were writing a paper about formatting and citing in APA style as an assignment for Psych 250. You can see the page number up in the right-hand corner here. Then a few lines down, I centered my title and it's in bold. Microsoft Word wasn't a fan of my title, but don't worry, I checked. It is absolutely correct. Next, you'll see that blank space and then my name formatted correctly, first, middle, last. Feel free to make a guess at what the R stands for if you feel like it. Below that, you see Department of Psychology, Valley City State University. Even though I'm not a psychology major, I list the Department of Psychology because that is what the paper is for. The next information is that course info, and if you don't know which section you're in, you can definitely ask your professor about that. Then you have the professor's name and your assignment due date. The other part of your paper that requires a little bit more formatting than the rest is the reference page. Every source that you use in your paper should be on your reference page, and anything on your reference page should also be listed in your paper somewhere. When you use the ideas from a source, you need to cite it in text and on that reference page. The only exception to this rule is when you need to cite personal communication, like an email or an interview with no published transcript. Your reference page should have references written at the top, centered and bolded. Double space citations and put your references in alphabetical order by the first letter of the entry. Usually that first letter will be the last name of the first author. You will also need to add a hanging indent, which means the first line of each reference sticks out and the rest of the lines get that indent. You write an author's name, last name, first initial, middle initial, and the titles of works, you only capitalize the first word of the title. In my opinion, the easiest way to have a neat, organized reference page is to create each citation in that page as you find your sources. And then you can always alphabetize and fix spacing and indentation if you need to after you've collected all of those sources. Speaking of citations, what exactly does an APA citation look like? APA citations are built using 4 main sections of information: the author, the date, the title, and the source. Each unique type of source will look a little bit different because they pull out different pieces of information from the 4 sections. Walking you through all of those different variations in citations would take a whole other video. So for now, I'm just going to show you a basic book citation and a basic article citation. The basic citation for a book should start with the name of the author, written last name, first initial, middle initial. Next is the year the book was published, which is put in parentheses, and you have the title of the book, which is written in italics. Only the first letter of that title should be capitalized, unless you have a subtitle, in which case that first letter of the subtitle can also be capitalized. The source elements for a book are the publisher's name and a digital object identifier. That's a tongue twister right there, if one exists. For a basic article, you can see the author looks the same as for books. If you have multiple authors, you list all of them in the same inverted format, making sure that the order in which you list these authors matches the article itself. Make sure you put commas between all of the authors and use an and sign in between the last two authors. The year is exactly the same as with books. It just goes in those parentheses. Your article title will also match the same capitalization, but you do not italicize the article. Instead, you'll italicize the title of the journal or the periodical. For peer-reviewed sources, that would be the name of the academic journal where it was published. Then you put the volume number and issue number in place, the page numbers of the article, and again, a DOI. The periodical title, as you might notice, does get to have everything capitalized. And the volume and issue numbers, you can't tell here, but you don't need to label them like volume 1 or anything like that. You just put the number of the volume and the number of the issue, and that issue number goes in parentheses. That's a lot of information to take in, I know. But don't panic. There are so many great resources available to you online to help you understand citations. Check out the research guide for Psych 250 to find links for several of these resources, including our citation help guide, which you can also just locate on the library website. All right, we are in the home stretch now. Take a deep breath, adjust your posture if you need to. Let's get this done. Earlier, I mentioned that every time you use another person's ideas or research in your paper, you need to cite them in the text of your paper as well as on the reference page. The way that you do this is through in-text citations. In-text citations will always include the author's last name and the year of publication. If you are directly quoting a source, you should also put the page number your quote came from in that citation. As I mentioned before, personal communications like emails are only cited using in-text citations. There are two ways that APA refers to in-text citations. Those are parenthetical citations and narrative citations. There are really, really minor differences between the two. I'll show you that right now. Parenthetical citations are the default in-text citation. These are what you use when you have not mentioned the author in your sentence already. These citations can go at the end of the sentence or within it, whichever makes the most sense. If you have two authors, you can put the and sign between the last names. You can see I have a couple examples here of that with the parenthetical citations. We have the single author and the multiple author citations. So that's parenthetical. Narrative citations are used when you've already mentioned the author in your sentence. You will put the year of publication in parentheses directly after the author's name. If you're using a direct quote, the best way to use these narrative citations is to put both the author's name and the year in your sentence, and then the page number at the end of your quote in parentheses. You can see both here. I know my camera is a little bit covering one of these examples. You can also see those examples on the slides that are posted in that Psych 250 research guide. So far, we've been talking about APA style as it relates to papers, but how about presentations? It's pretty easy actually to adapt APA. Any information that would go on your title page should go on that title slide, that first slide of your presentation. You should increase the font size to make sure it's minimum 18-point font. Anything smaller than that is harder for your audience to read and can cause accessibility issues. For any points made using your sources within your presentation, you need to use those in-text citations with the parentheses that we just talked about. And then you should have a references slide at the end of your presentation. It can be single-spaced, but your citations, your references should still be created and formatted using APA style. All right, we have made it to the end of this video. I know we've covered a lot of information here in a pretty short amount of time. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions about anything that I discussed here, or really any other questions that you have. You're more than welcome to send me an email, contact me using the library's Ask a Librarian page, or even send me a chat on Microsoft Teams. If you're in the Valley City area, you can also stop by the library between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. I try to be at my desk as much as possible, and I'm always happy to help. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, let me know if I can help you out with anything at all. Bye!